The podcast is Going to the Conspiracy, featuring Auckland's Josh Addison and Bucharest's Dr. Matthew R. X. Dentith.
Hello, you're listening to and quite possibly watching the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy. My name's Josh Addison. I'm currently sitting in my bedroom in Auckland, New Zealand, and sitting on the other side of the world and located kind of up above me a little bit on the screen here is Dr. Matthew R. X. Dentith sitting in his bedroom in Bucharest, Romania. It's a bedroom special today, rather saucy.
Well, we like to keep our audience. We just like to keep.
We'd like to keep our audience. That would be awesome.
And the thing that keeps our audience is seeing our bedrooms. They've got a thing for it. They've really got a thing for seeing our bedrooms.
The sexual frisson of the boudoir. I mean,
really, you should be calling this Podcaster's Guide to the Bedroom.
Well, I'm pretty sure that must already exist, but no, we are not the Podcaster's Guide to the Bedroom. We are the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, and we came here to talk about conspiracies and chew bubblegum. And I don't actually like chewing bubblegum.
All out of conspiracy theories, and neither of us like bubblegum. So
we're just going to stare at the screen for the next hour.
About bedrooms, because somehow that was a good way to introduce a podcast. It's that kind of quality material that gets us new patrons. They just love the off-the-cuff attempts at humour. Attempts at humour, I should point out. Attempts at
Is that a segue I detect, Dr. Dentith?
It is a segue, because we have a new patron.
Hooray.
We would like to say hello to Hayden. Hayden has joined us from the heady world of planet Earth, where he wants to fight against the encroaching darkness of the alien shape-shifting reptile agenda. And so we welcome you, Hayden, into our little conspiracy to, as previously noted, to end humanity once and for all. Those alien shape-shifting reptiles will not be causing you any more issue when you and your filthy kind no longer exist. Humans, better off without them.
But in the meantime, we'll record a weekly podcast. I'm sure that'll get us towards our goal somehow. Some way, I suppose. Yes.
Every bit counts. Every bit counts.
Yes. Now, I suppose we'd best get into the news. Last week, we had a bunch of Trump-related news, but we thought, no, everyone's sick of hearing about Trump, and we had a lot of material, so we decided we'd talk about Trump this week, and boy howdy, Matthew, did he give us something to talk about this week. But before we get into all that business, maybe we should just start our news update and see where it wants to say degenerates. It's not possible. Just see where it goes, Matthew. Let's see where it goes.
I'm glad to see this introduction started off well and ended on the same caliber that it began with.
Words from the mouth hole make with noise. Yes.
Yes, after chime, speak English proper we shall. Chime. Chime.
Breaking conspiracy theories in the news.
Okay, well, we won't dive headlong into the Trumpy goodness yet, because there's been plenty of other conspiracy stuff happening in the world. Yet another one of those medical conspiracies has cropped up. There's been a few that we've talked about, and not and fairly recently as well. But the latest one, there's been allegations of criminal conspiracy in the NHS in England, to do with a tainted blood scandal. Back in the
Tainted blood.
I know that's the first thing I think, but this is serious.
Blood.
People died, Matthew. But yes, it does. That is. That was a cover. Soft Cell did that. That was a cover of an old sort of soul hit, and Soft Cell did not write that song. But the version we know.
I think I was aware of that, but the version we know has kind of supplanted it.
It really has.
Tainted blood. Oh, tainted blood.
Don't. Anyway, no. So what actually happened was that from sometime in the 70s to sometime in the 1980s, these they call them blood products. I don't know if that's specifically just transfusions or where they take out whatever it is, platelets and plasma and what have you. But blood products were given to haemophiliacs, and some of this blood had been not particularly well vetted where it had been coming from, and some of it ended up being tainted with the likes of HIV and hepatitis, which apparently contributed to the deaths of over 2,000 people. Um, and what brings it into the realms of conspiracy is that documentation has now come out showing that officials were aware that these products were tainted in the early 80s. I think they had one memo from 1983, but they continued using them until well into 1985. So there is a definite cover-up that appeared to be going on. It's almost hard to know whether it was like, well, here are people suffering from this medical condition. They're probably going to die without the stuff, so we might as well give it to them because it might not kill them. I don't know. But very definitely it appears to have come out that officials who should have known better knew that stuff was going on, but kept quiet about it for a period of years, basically. Um, and yes, there's I think it's more relatives of deceased rather than people who are actually infected themselves have been sort of threatening a lawsuit. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, it's interesting. These things just seem to cropping up, don't they? Seem to keep
Yeah, the
cropping up.
medical world does seem to be one which is filled with criminal malfeasance. People not wanting to reveal things that they know, doing dodgy experiments in the background. I mean, as a big fan of medical science, we wouldn't be here
Yep.
where
No.
we are today without medical science. It is a bit depressing that people who put forward conspiracy theories about the medical fraternity have such fruitful evidence to rely upon to go, well, look, in the past they've done things like this. And it's very hard to go, no, they haven't, because actually they have. There are good grounds to be suspicious of the medical fraternity and the establishment, even if you are someone who thinks that, by and large, medical science is brilliant.
Which is a bit of a shame. Now, what's been going on in North Korea? The headline you've written down here is North Korea claims CIA plotted to kill glorious leader. That doesn't actually sound like much of a surprise to me. What's the story there? He said,
Well, no,
hiccuping.
it's more that the North Korean establishment is talking quite explicitly about an American plot to dispose of the supreme leader. So the DPKR have said that there was a CIA plot to destabilize and destroy the supreme leadership. That's pretty much coded for Kim Jong-un as words. The intro's coming back to threaten us. I've lost my ability to make my tongue waggle in a way which produces convincing enunciated words that other human beings or human replicas like ourselves can understand. So yes, so North Korean authorities are claiming the CIA have been engaged in a plot to kill the glorious leader. As you say, that doesn't sound particularly surprising. We kind of
Seems like the
assume
sort
the
of thing they'd
CIA are
do.
fomenting plots to kill people all the time, but apparently the plot included the use of biochemical substances, including radioactive substances and nano-poisonous substance, which the results would appear after 6 or 12 months. So the perfect poison. Although if you're going to kill a tin pot dictator, why would you have a delayed reaction of 6 to 12 months? They can do an awful lot of damage in the space of half a year. That seems like a bad plot. If you want to assassinate a world leader, just do it quickly. Don't take your time about it, because who knows what they'll do in the frenzy of their death fervor.
Yes. And yeah, I mean, what's the point? Plausible deniability or something. It's like, couldn't have been us who poisoned him. We haven't been anywhere near Kim Jong Un for 6 months or so. But who cares? Yes, no, I agree. It's a silly plot, and I'll hear no more of it, Matthew. No
Well,
more. Oh,
except
fine, Matthew. I will
imagine
hear
if
more of it,
Kim Jong
Matthew.
Un imagine if Kim Jong Un died of what appeared to be natural causes, or say a health-related disorder. His diet is not meant to be the best one in the world, and he's a heavy smoker. So imagine if he dies unexpectedly in the next, say, 2 or 3 months. This is the perfect cover story to explain the death of the Supreme Leader with respect to a foreign plot as opposed to a degenerate lifestyle. So
I
on
suppose that
many
is true,
respects,
yes.
these kind of stories actually serve the leadership because people are worried about the health status of the Supreme Leader, and they're worried that maybe the lifestyle he's living might contribute to an early death. So what better way to cover up a degenerate lifestyle than by blaming a foreign power? A foreign power which plausibly is actually already thinking of taking the Supreme Leader out anyway.
Yes, I know that is a fair point. Um, but let us stall no more, because we've 2 weeks of Trump-related conspiracy theories to get through. But of course, the big one is the firing of James Comey, um, about which very much could be said. Where to even start, Matthew?
Well, my suspicion is, given that this is a breaking story, we may be covering this in substantial depth next week or in a few weeks' time, especially when we find out who replaces James Comey as head of the FBI. But yes, basically, Trump has fired the head of the FBI nominally because the head of the FBI bungled the investigation into Hillary Clinton. Because James Comey came out and said there would be no prosecutions of Hillary Clinton over the use of a private email server. It turns out that that kind of judgment should have been made by the Department of Justice and not by the head of the FBI. And Trump and the Deputy Attorney General thinks that that is ground for removing James Comey from office, which the President is allowed to do. The President is allowed to fire the head of the FBI at will for any reason. It's one of the few powers the President can actually exercise without restraint. If you don't like the head of the FBI, you can remove the head of the FBI. Of course, the worry is the head of the FBI is currently leading an investigation into exactly what the role of Russia was in the US presidential election. So whilst people are going, it's true that Trump has said he fired Comey because of his bungling of the Clinton investigation, it seems reasonable to assume that Trump is very angry about the ongoing talk of Russia's role in the election which made him president, and Comey is the most vocal and outstanding figure associated with that investigation. Maybe he fired the head of the FBI on the thought that that would shut those investigations down or remove those investigations from being discussed in the media.
Which I must say has not really worked whatsoever. I think one of the first things people said was to compare this to the so-called Saturday Night Massacre during the Watergate investigation, where Richard Nixon dismissed, what was his name, Archibald Cox, the independent special prosecutor of the time. So that, yes, is certainly a very unflattering comparison to be making straight away. But of course, as we say, this has not stopped people talking about Russia one little bit. If anything, it's had quite the opposite effect.
And indeed, the acting head of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, who is only a temporary stand-in head until such time Trump appoints a new head of the FBI, is standing by the investigation of the Russia scandal. He says he won't update the White House on the investigation. He will report the White House to the Senate if they try to interfere, and is kind of going against message, because one of the things which came out after Comey was fired was Sean Spicer and Kellyanne Conway saying, well, Comey had lost support in the FBI, which was another reason why he had to be removed. He was an unpopular head of the FBI. And Andrew McCabe has said, no, actually Comey enjoys broad support within the FBI. So it does seem as if the FBI is kind of going against the White House here and saying, you may be trying to shut down our investigation. That investigation is still ongoing, and it is a major investigation. We will get to the bottom of it.
Yes, I've heard FBI agents have supposedly been changing their Facebook profile pictures to a picture of James Comey, which is something they normally do when an agent is killed in action. They appear to be, yes, showing support for him. And it's been interesting how Trump has been trying to have his cake and eat it too with regards to his reasons for firing him, or his justification, because originally the line was very much he did it as recommended by the Attorney General and I can't remember who the other figure was. Do you remember? There were two people he appealed to as saying, based on the recommendation of these people, I think I need to fire him. He then turned around and said, no, I was always going to fire him. Whether they'd told me to or not to, it was definitely going to be my decision. He sort of first tried to back away from responsibility for the firing and then tried to take full responsibility for the firing.
Yeah, there's been a really interesting discussion about Trump's psychology. So there was a piece I read earlier this week. I can't remember. It may have been a Medium essay. And it was the argument that traditionally we associate politicians as having long-term agendas. But from what we can tell from Trump, knowing his history, Trump is a very reactive figure. Events occur, he reacts to them. There's no consistency in his reactions over time. And so the worry is people are assuming there's a plot here, that Trump is doing something to derail a particular long-term investigation. But Trump might just be reacting to things on a moment-by-moment basis, which explains why he keeps on changing his story about Comey. It's not so much that there's a conspiracy, although there probably is, it's just that when Trump does things, Trump doesn't act with any consistency, and that's the only consistent thing we know about him.
Yes, so as you say, there's probably a good amount more to come out of this story. And if it gets big enough, we may well end up devoting an entire episode to it, but we'll have to see for now. But yes, we still had a list of stuff left over from last week that we never even got through. The first of which being the interesting case of Steve Bannon's whiteboard. A week, possibly almost 2 weeks ago now, Steve Bannon was having visitors at his office in the White House, wherever he's been poked these days, and they took photos and posted those photos on Twitter, and those photos were of his visitors, Mr. Bannon and his visitors, standing in front of a whiteboard on which appeared to be written a whole bunch of policy goals, some of which were ticked off as having already been achieved, and some of which were obviously things that he wanted for the future. Now, there was nothing actually mind-blowing revealed there. There was no, poison the water supply, no, reveal the presence of alien shapeshifters or anything like that. It was all very much the same.
No resurrect Michael Jackson from the dead to perform a special benefit concert for Donald Trump.
It was all basically just the anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim stuff that seems to be Steve Bannon's stock and trade. So it wasn't so much the content of this email, of this information that was inadvertently shown to the world. It was simply the fact that it was shown to the world in the first place. Not unlike just sort of a not a good look security-wise, not unlike the photos that came out today of the Russian diplomats that Trump met with. What were their specific stations? Do you recall?
The Russian foreign
minister, yeah,
and the ambassador to the US.
Photos of the two of them with Trump in the Oval Office came out, and people were like, hang on, what was a photographer doing taking pictures of things in the Oval Office? And a photographer for Russian media, I believe. So again, I don't believe anything incriminating actually appeared in these photographs that we saw, but not a good look for the fact that they were taken in the first place.
And also just for the sheer fact that it fits into the narrative of President Bannon, the idea that actually it's Steve Bannon's policy agenda which is driving the White House. And here you have Steve Bannon with a whiteboard of all of his wanted goals, slowly ticking them off, as if he's the real power behind the throne.
Now, of course, his supposed arch-rival in the White House is Jared Kushner. What have people been saying about him and George Soros?
Well, so it turns out that one of the companies that Kushner and his brother Josh run, called Cadre, may well be financially backed or at least supported by a George Soros foundation or fund.
Right. So that's...
And of course this fits in with our discussion of George Soros from a few weeks ago. The idea that he's the puppet master behind the throne, that he uses his money to influence politics. And of course, one of the big things which is going on in the White House at the moment is the rather public feud between Steve Bannon and Jared Kushner, where Steve Bannon has referred to Kushner as a cuck and a globalist. Of course, George Soros is probably the most famous billionaire globalist there is. So the idea that people have found that some of the money behind cadre may well have come from a Soros fund is fueling the conspiracy theory that Kushner and Ivanka Trump are secret liberals in the White House who are going to try and push forward a Democrat-style agenda during a Republican regime.
Is there any substance to this at all? I mean, just from your description there, it sounds very sort of arm's length. A foundation, Soros has funded a foundation which has given money to a thing which he owns. It's not like George Soros has been slipping 50s into Jared Kushner's back pocket.
Right.
As far as we know.
Given that our main topic this week is talking about the Koch brothers, it kind of fits in with a general narrative that these rich billionaires... Are there such things as poor billionaires? I was just wondering whether saying a rich billionaire is a tautology there. I suppose it depends on where you live. So, for example, a millionaire in Auckland isn't necessarily in a position to buy a house. Maybe a billionaire in
Dubai
some
or something,
weird city-state will turn out to actually be relatively poor. So maybe there are poor billionaires on a contextual level in some parts of the earth, in respect that you can be a billionaire and not be able to buy a house, a millionaire and not be able to buy a house in Auckland, Aotearoa. So the idea that there are these billionaires out there using their money to fund other people is taken to be an indirect way of controlling people's political beliefs, as we'll see with discussion of the Koch brothers later on in this episode.
Yes, we will. Now, the next note is one of yours, Matthew. It's White House refuses to cooperate over Flynn investigation. Has this been sort of superseded by the Comey firing? I mean, that's some proper refusal to cooperate right there, I would have thought. But that's not the only way they've been trying to stymie various investigations, is it?
Yeah, so the White House has said, look, Mike Flynn isn't working for us anymore. The documentation is rather crucial. We don't think it should be released. It'll reveal things that aren't salient to the investigation but are salient to our administration. The Senate has basically gone, no, we need to see the documentation. We need to see what kind of links Michael Flynn had to Russia and how much you knew about those links before you said you knew about them and then fired him. So yes, it is an ongoing issue. I think the Comey issue is probably a much bigger one. But it does seem as if particular parts of the American government are taking these Russian allegations quite seriously and going, there probably is a lot more to this than maybe the administration is letting on. And given that they're trying to stymie the investigation at all blocks, we need to try and get this information out, and if they're not going to volunteer the information, we will have to use a legal route instead.
Fair enough. Well, last one. Okay, Matthew, here's your chance. Let me have it. Why is Donald Trump all John Rogers' fault?
Alright, so there was a very interesting article I read 2 weeks ago which posited that the Writers Guild Association strike back in 2007, a strike I remember well because basically that was a death knell to the amazing show Pushing Daisies, may that have led to a Trump presidency? The argument goes like this. So in 2007, The Apprentice was a low-rating reality TV show. And then the writer's strike occurred. And the writer's strike meant that no scripted dramas could be produced, which meant that the only thing that TV production companies could produce rapidly was reality TV. And suddenly The Apprentice went from being a low-rated drama, reality TV show to becoming a very high-rated show again, which then led to Donald Trump's popularity. So this article jokingly takes the notion that maybe the reason why we have Donald Trump as president is due to the fact that there was a writer's strike in 2007, which put his star back into ascendance. Now, of course, you keep on going on about your personal TV writing hero, John Rogers. John Rogers is a well-known Guild affiliate and union organizer, so I put squarely on his table the notion that he is directly responsible for Donald Trump becoming president. I've said it here. You heard it here, folks. John Rogers is the reason why we have Donald Trump as president of the United States of America. How do you react to your hero being responsible for this Republican regime, Joshua? How do you react to it?
Well, the counter theory, I suppose, well, actually, I suppose they're not actually counters. They're more kind of complementary. Was the idea that Trump never would have run for president this time had he not had The Apprentice not been canned more recently, and that if NBC had just given him more series of the show, he would have been happy doing that and wouldn't have felt the need to gather up more attention by running for president. But yes, I suppose the two are not incompatible. So in that case, I'll simply have to say, a pox upon you, Matthew. I will have my revenge in this life or the next.
And of course, you'll stop watching John Rogers related TV shows and movies,
I
won't
don't think
you?
he has anything out going at the moment. He's not working on The Librarians now. I don't know what he's doing, actually. There'll be
Oh,
something.
did he stop working on the
I think he
Librarians?
did, yeah. I don't think he was directly involved with the most recent season. I'm not
I only
sure.
watched the first episode of season 3, and I really wasn't enticed to go back to it.
No, it didn't. It really didn't have that season didn't have the sort of the connectivity of the first two, where you'd have a whole bunch of seemingly unrelated episodes, and then at the end it would tie everything together, and you're like, oh right, this and that, and then it all fits and it makes sense. Whereas this one just kind of, yeah, I don't know, it didn't feel as cohesive as previous ones. Nevertheless, The Librarians is a fun TV series, and I recommend you watch it.
I will watch anything with John Larroquette in it,
Mm.
but it's going to take me a while to get round to finishing season 3 of The Librarians. I will watch it, but only because of John.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I think we're out of news now. So
We are. The only thing now is to do a line of Coke
Yep.
and start talking more about Coke.
Let's do that.
Yeah, let's do some Coke, baby.
Lovely. Right.
Oh, actually, I just need to rub some on my.
That's not a thing, is it? The whole rubbing cocaine on your gums, that's just something that TV cop shows invented, isn't it? Like, there's no reason to do that at
No,
all.
it is.
Or does it tingle? But
No, it is. It is another way of getting it into your bloodstream.
right. But it always used to be on cop shows. They'd like rub it on their gums to check that it was cocaine without getting high, or I don't know. I gather it was a silly thing.
Actually, I am quite curious to know whether police officers ever actually did that, or whether that was just a convenient way on TV to, rather than go back to the lab and check whether this is coke, we'll just get the cops to do
Yeah.
that. And of course, TV writers would know, because as we know, in the 80s, TV writers were high on coke all the time. And B, whether modern police officers would ever do that, or whether that would be considered to be, as I would take it, tampering with the evidence.
Yes, you would think so, wouldn't you? But yes, no, we are talking about the Koch brothers. Is it like Dutch? Is it sort of a Koch? Is it one of those? Like Vincent van Gogh, I believe the correct pronunciation is along the lines of Van Gogh. So I'm guessing it's related to something like that. But it's definitely not pronounced cock, which is a shame, because we love cock. And the various puns.
We would have been
We
all about the
are
cock
so
this episode.
so many puns, but no, it's not to be. So the reason, of course, why we're talking about this is a few weeks ago now we talked about George Soros, who's very much the bogeyman of the conservative right, this giant billionaire who's supposedly using his enormous wealth and influence to further his dirty left-wing agenda, and then figured, well, of course, he has his equivalent on the right in the Koch brothers, who are very much the bogeyman of the liberal left, or bogeymen rather. because they also are ridiculously wealthy people who supposedly use their enormous wealth and influence to further their much more right-wing conservative views. So I figured if we'd talked about Soros, it would make sense to talk about the Koch brothers. So I suppose first of all, who are they? Charles and David are the two people that they're normally talking about when people talk about the Koch brothers. There are four of them apparently, but it's Charles and David who are the ones who are the most politically active. Sons of Fred Koch, founder of Koch Industries, which Wikipedia tells me is the second largest privately owned company in the United States. I gather it's one of those companies that just like owns stuff, that like invests in things, and it's not like they're a you know steel manufacturing thing. I don't know. Maybe they do own some steel manufacturing things, but they're just one of those ridiculously large businesses that owns everything.
They
Hmm.
aggregate and conglomerate a whole bunch of other businesses and then make money from either restructuring those businesses or selling those businesses on. They're a business that exists to sell and buy businesses, which thus provides them with business to make them
Hmm.
rich.
So Charles and David, A, the two who are most politically active, and B, the two who are still apparently with Koch Industries. I gather there's a whole lot of juicy gossip around which of there are the various fallings outs and recriminations and legal actions and so on between the various brothers about who has control and what and so on and so forth. But I think that's just rich people being rich people, from what I can understand. Um, so Charles and David, the brothers Koch, have been around. Well, they've been around for a while because they must be in their what 60s now, aren't they? They've been getting there, but they've been around in politics since around the 1980s. And as I understand it, they really sort of made a name for themselves during the 2008 election. I gather that's when they really went for broke and started piling lots of money in. And of course, in 2008, things did not work out the way they would have wanted to. But they are the founders of numerous organizations and think tanks and so on. I gather now their policy, their personal politics are sort of conservative but quite libertarian as well, aren't they?
Yes, so they're a kind of interesting mix of the traditional right Republican supporter with a certain libertarian slant. So they're all for conservative financial policies, but they're not that concerned about conservatism when it comes to social
Hmm.
policies, i.e., you should be free to do whatever you like in the privacy of your own home. So yes, they're financially conservative, but taken to be somewhat socially liberal. Not
No.
entirely socially liberal, but somewhat socially
So
liberal. The Koch brothers are not going to come into your bedroom and say the government should be regulating that thing you're doing with your
hmm.
penis or your coach.
Or your Coke, yes. Yes, I mean they are very much opposed to climate change legislation, for instance, but they also, I believe, they were fairly vocal in their opposition to the Patriot Act when Bush was putting that through, it being, an assault on personal freedoms. And apparently they're quite big advocates for reform of the criminal justice system in the States as well, which I think quite a lot of people, left and right, would think is a fairly laudable goals. There do seem to be some fairly significant systemic problems there. I think the biggest, the well, or at least the thing of theirs that I personally have heard of before I'd even heard of the Koch brothers, is the Cato Institute, which I think was founded quite some time ago now. I think Charles was one of its original founders. But yes, I've heard plenty of the Cato Institute. I just kind of really know them though as that libertarian think tank that occasionally puts out things about how we should sell the sky, and everyone should be free to make their own footpaths and not have. I don't really know a lot about libertarian views. It all sounds quite silly to me. But yes, Cato Institute. What's
They
their
are
deal?
silly.
Hmm.
Libertarian views are silly. And if there are any listeners who are going, oh, you've just offended my politics, you're right, I have.
Hmm.
Libertarian views are just silly, just like anarchist views. They're almost exactly
I
the same, but
love
we won't get into
I
that right
love
now.
watching anarchists argue with libertarians. I love.
I know, it's almost as if they can't work out what they're arguing
Well,
about.
it's just watching libertarians, the big sort of freedom guys, being called being called compulsion touters and saying, you people, you just want to take all our rights and lock us up. And they're like, what? No, we're the ones who don't think that. And then it's like, no, we're the ones who think that, and so on and so forth. But anyway, tell me about the Cato Institute, please, Matthew.
So I think it was actually once upon a time called the Koch brothers Foundation, and it got renamed to the Cato Institute. I'm assuming it got renamed to the Cato Institute to give it a kind of plausible distance from the Koch brothers
Bit
and
more of
their
appearance of
personal
objectivity.
politics. It's one of the bigger think tanks in the US. It's quite well respected. So the idea is that independent scholars go and work at the Cato Institute for a period of time. They write research papers and policy papers. These get distributed to senators and Congress people to allow for political discussion over particular issues. It is pretty much on the libertarian scale of producing research. So Cato scholars routinely call for the privatization of things like NASA, Social Security, the United States Postal Service, Transportation Security Administration, public transport systems, and public broadcasting. They tend to write on the idea that the minimum wage is a bad idea and it should be abolished. They are very critical of the notion of public sector unions and support right-to-work laws, which are basically anti-union laws, and therefore the total abolition of the welfare state. They also tend to oppose universal healthcare, and this is one which always gets me, they're against affirmative action.
That's why does that one in particular get you?
Well, because whilst I can see, with respect to libertarian views, the notion that everything should be kept private and the government should intervene, even though I don't agree with those views, I can kind of see where libertarians get that. The idea of being against affirmative action for restoring historical injustices, it just seems so petty and cruel to go, well look, here are systemic injustices baked into the very structure of our society, and we're against any kind of regulation that's going to resolve that. Now, of course, the reason why libertarians, by and large, are against that is they're kind of either in denial for systemic injustices, or they go, we should forget about the past and just be equal under the law now. So they recognise the injustices have occurred, but think that the only solution is to just have the status quo. But it seems so petty, the idea that we shouldn't be doing small things to help people who have been marginalised by past decisions. But, that's libertarians for you. They don't really think of the big picture or the small picture. They just think about their own individual liberty, and that's about it.
It does seem that way
Yeah,
sometimes.
I am wondering how many listeners we've just lost with that
Anti-libertarian,
positive critique
yes.
of individualism and objective. Oh, that's the other thing. There's the kind of tendency amongst modern Cato research to be pretty pro Ayn Rand. So there's also the dreaded
The
objectivism
objectivists.
creeping into their work as
Because
well.
because libertarianism in New Zealand is pretty much full-on objectivism, isn't it?
Yeah, well, so it's not necessarily so in the US. Objectivism and libertarianism. Objectivists don't like libertarians because they think of them as being weak-willed objectivists who are succumbing to status tendencies.
Right. Yes, so it is entirely possible that we've been our perspective is slightly skewed, and that we are mostly exposed to the more crazy end of the libertarian spectrum by virtue of being New Zealanders. But anyway, we're not here to bash libertarianism, fun though it may be. Yes, so the Cato Institute is the most well-known, I suppose, of the Koch brothers foundations, but they've done a bunch of them, and as well as founding these think tanks, which can be sort of putting forward the sorts of policies that they'd be in favour of. They splash their money around just in terms of campaign contributions and so on. I forget exactly. I don't have the numbers of exactly how many millions they've given away to various people in various campaigns and various elections, but it's been a hell of a lot. Which I suppose would not make it surprising that they feature a lot in conspiracy theories, but like sort of my I started thinking about this. Okay, we'll ask the same questions of the Koch brothers that we did of George Soros. First one, who is he? What's his deal? Second one, why are there so many conspiracy theories about them? And I realized I'm just assuming there are lots of conspiracy theories about the Koch brothers, but I can't think of any. I don't know of any offhand. And what I do know that they've done seems to be fairly sort of out in the open. I mean, is there much conspiratorial said about the Koch brothers, or is it just presented as here are these guys, here's what they do, they make no secret of it, and that's a bit of a worry.
Well, like our worry about discussion of conspiracy theories about George Soros, yes, here we have billionaires with explicit political agendas involving themselves in politics and not being secretive about it. Now, the reason why there are conspiracy theories both about George Soros and the Koch brothers is what I like to term the kind of the Fox News conundrum. So everyone knows that Rupert Murdoch is a powerful right-wing figure in the US and UK media. And people are also aware that the news organisations that work for Rupert Murdoch, by and large, have a right-wing slant. Now, one set of theorists will go, well, that's because Rupert Murdoch has ordered people in the organisation to report on news in a right-wing fashion, i.e. he's deliberately perverting the reporting of news to fit his political agenda. Well, so other theorists will go, well, no, that kind of top-down control isn't what Rupert Murdoch does. What Rupert Murdoch does is he simply says, these are my views, and the people under him go, well, if I want to please Rupert and make my way up through the echelon of Fox News, I need to produce work that makes Rupert happy. So as the news editor, I will be happy when reporters provide me with news which has a slightly right-wing slant. News reporters who want to make the news editor happy will produce news reports with a slightly right-wing slant, which will go all the way down to janitorial staff making sure that they only read Rupert Murdoch-related papers and the like, in the hope that their jobs will be secured long-term. And this is the worry we have with both George Soros and the Koch brothers here, which is that these are people with known political agendas, and if you want to get money from them, you better be the kind of person who also espouses that particular type of politics. So people point out one of the big things that happened during the last presidential election was that the Koch brothers weren't very happy with Donald Trump as the choice by the Republicans, or at least a subsection of the Republicans, as a contender in the presidential primaries. And there was talk that the Koch brothers were going to withdraw their funding of the Republican Party if Donald Trump became the nominee, because they didn't see him as being on the spectrum of right-wing views that they want to fund. And of course you can think about it in one of two ways. Either the Koch brothers are telling the Republicans, you need to appoint someone who is sympathetic to our views, i.e. they're telling the Republicans what policy platforms they're meant to run under, or they're going, well look, we donate money to political parties, and this year we don't see a candidate that we like, so we won't be funding you this year. So they're not directly telling the Republicans to run a particular candidate. They're simply going, look, your organisation doesn't fit our agenda this year, so no money, but next time round, maybe when you appoint a different candidate, the money will come back. And people suspect the Koch brothers of doing the top-down control thing, when actually what they might be doing is well, we're rich, we can spend money whatever way we like. This year we support the Republicans, maybe next year we won't, depending on the kind of candidates they're fielding. So yes, there is a worry here that maybe we're inferring the existence of conspiracies, when maybe the Koch brothers are just funding things that they like, and sometimes taking that funding away when the things don't match their agendas.
This actually, just while you were talking about that, that put me in mind of your interview with Martin Orr last week when you were talking about secrecy. How does the like of an open secret affect conspiracy theories? Because I think sort of the whole sort of the influence of big businesses and rich individuals on the political process is perhaps something that you might call an open secret, and that everybody knows it happens, but possibly the people involved in it wouldn't explicitly admit to it as such. So it seems interesting that you could have notions of conspiracies going on there, conducted in secret, and that their activities are sort of a secret but an open secret.
Yeah, so the idea that Republicans on the ground might go, well, look, we need funding for our election or re-election campaigns for this term, so we need to appoint someone that the Koch brothers are going to fund. But they might never say that explicitly. They might never go to the media, right, so we made our decisions this year as to who was going to run in the midterm re-elections based entirely upon the kind of candidates the Koch brothers would be willing to fund. No one's going to say that in the media, but it might be what everyone knows is going on. So it might be an open secret that Republicans are selecting candidates based upon their ability to get money from rich donors, even though they're always going to claim, no, we selected this candidate because they're the best candidate available at the time. They've got particular political merits and the like. And yes, there could be a kind of open secret going on there, which might suggest not a conspiracy by the Koch brothers per se, but a conspiracy by the Republicans to get funding from the Koch brothers on an election-by-election basis.
Yeah, so yeah, when it comes to conspiracy theories, at least I'm not aware of any. Like the George Soros ones sounded more sinister. They sound, there seem to be ones suggesting that he had some sort of a horrible hidden agenda, whereas the Koch brothers seem to be fairly open about theirs. Has there been any? Actually, here's something. What does David Icke have anything to say about the Koch brothers? Are they on his list?
That is a very good question. Offhand, I don't remember him mentioning the Koch brothers at any point during his talks. He does mention George Soros. George Soros is a constant thorn in the side of many a conspiracy theorist. The Koch brothers don't appear in as many conspiracy theories as I'm aware, although that might be an implicit bias on my part for reading more about right-wing conspiracy theories than say I do about left-wing conspiracy theories. But that's a really good question. I may have to go away and see whether I can find any references to the Koch brothers in the works of illustrious guest of the show,
Yes,
David Icke.
yes, they do seem like the sort of people who he would. I don't know. Maybe it's a bit too easy. Maybe it's a bit too obvious that these guys, who are throwing their money around for explicit political purposes, maybe it'd be too easy to say that they're alien shapeshifters who run on it all. Maybe the shapeshifters need to like to be a bit more secretive, a bit less overt in their shape-shifting alien plans.
Or maybe aliens don't come as sets of 2 to 4. Maybe aliens are always single children.
It's possibly true. Yes, yes. We don't know. We just don't know enough about these alien shape-shifting reptiles. Matthew, go sit through another 11-hour David Icke lecture, please. We need to know more.
Okay, fine. I wonder what illness I'll get this time.
Yes.
First time, sprained ankle. Second time, really bad head cold. What's going to be the trifecta?
It's almost like someone doesn't want you there, Matthew. It's almost like cosmic forces are keeping you away from David Icke. Why are we talking about David Icke when we should be talking about the Koch brothers? Says the guy who introduced the topic of David Icke himself a few minutes ago.
How's that short-term memory loss working out?
Milk and 2 sugars, please.
Certainly. Although I am vegan, so it'll have to be soy milk.
Yeah, that's fine. Yes. So, I guess, as I recall, the last thing we asked about the George Soros conspiracy theories are any of them warranted? It seems a little more questionable regarding the Koch brothers, whether they're conspiracy theories at all. But I suppose any conspiracy theory or any theory that you wanted to bring up about the Koch brothers, a case could be made for simply from the fact that they have more money than God. They have the power and the influence that if they wanted to establish a policy that the American military should start bombing the moon, they could swing their considerable weight behind it. So it's again another one of those speculative ones, I guess. if the Koch brothers did want to
And
do something dodgy, they could.
The issue, of course, tends to be, like George Soros, the Koch brothers have a variety of different institutions, some of which they're very hands-on for, some of which they're very much removed from. And these different institutions, of course, own other companies and institutions, so you can always find a nested link to the Koch brothers, at least within the American business world, of some particular kind, as we've seen with the claim that George Soros might be indirectly funding Jared and Josh Kushner. So there's always the notion that, maybe explicitly they're not conspiring to control American politics, but their fingers are in so many different pies. Can you really tell me they're not using one of those pies to chase the American dream?
What is the American dream?
Something, 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 American pie.
With a finger in it.
That's not how the film worked.
No, as I recall, it was not. No, let's not go there.
In fact, it was a Koch in the pie.
Yes. So, I think if we go any further, we're probably just going to devolve into numerous references to penises and Class A drugs. Do you have anything more of substance, Class A or not, to say about the Koch brothers?
No, I'm only Class B at this stage,
Right.
so I'm afraid to say that is as far as it goes.
Okay. Well, there we go. The Koch brothers and George Soros. Maybe we should just put them in a room and let them fight. Well, that's probably not fair because it'd be 2 against 1. It'd be like the fight at the end of The Raid. Have you seen The Raid?
I have indeed seen The Raid.
Yeah, the fight at the end with the two
There's much throat ripping that goes on in The Raid. I don't think there'd be much throat ripping going on in a fight between George Soros and the Koch brothers, although they might surprise us.
Yes, no, I'd pay to see that. Right, well, I guess then we've come to the end of an episode.
We have indeed.
It seems like...
Do we have anything to take us away?
Oh, we do. I suppose we should do the usual little bit of admin at the end, beginning with me saying you've been listening to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy. My name's Josh Addison. If you want to get in touch with me, you could send me a message on Twitter where my name is Monkey Fluids. That's all I normally say about myself, isn't it? Feels like there should be more. There should be more to me, Matthew, but there isn't, so I guess what can you do? Matthew, you, sir.
No, you're just a facsimile, an actor.
I'm just a patsy. I'm a shimp.
Your real name is Edgar Shivington. You come from Cornwall in Kent, which is not in the UK, even though they sound as if they're from the UK. And normally by day you're a blacksmith, but by night you are in fact the world's greatest thespian.
Well, I'm afraid you've said too much, Matthew, and now you must die. But before Matthew dies at my hands, you might like to get in touch with him as well. He's on Twitter. Conspiracism is one of his handles. H.O. Ransom is the other one. Ransom with an E on the end, isn't it?
It is indeed, and Ransom with an E.
What about you, Matthew? You have a website, episto.org, on which one might find all manner of wakiness and monkey shines and horse feathers and other old-fashioned expressions, and also videos and postings of this podcast. This podcast itself, you can find it on iTunes. If that's how you got here, please do the like and rate and give us a good rating and numerous stars and what have you thing. You can also find it hosted on podbean.com, which is what our generous patrons pay for. Conspiracism.podbean.com is where you'll find it there, and on there you'll find links to our various, our numerous, by numerous I mean 2 patronage campaigns. And finally, you could chuck us an email at, let me get this right, podcastconspiracy@gmail.com.
That's podcastconspiracy@gmail.com.
And I believe that's the lot. Any last words, Matthew?
Aardvark.
Always a good one. Usually the first word, actually. So good on you. Nice bit of avant-garde styling there, getting in at the very end.
But you know me and my Dada-esque approach to humour.
Yes, I certainly do. So we'll go out on a song. This one's by the Impossebulls, who we've heard from a few times in the past. I like their moxie, and it's called Brothers, because that is entirely relevant to the topic of this week's episode. So as we go out to Brothers by the Impossibulls, just remains for me to say goodbye, and for Matthew to say...
Lovely stuff.
Marvellous. Goodbye.
Goodbye. You've been listening to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, starring Josh Addison and Matthew R.X. Dentith, and produced by Matthew R.X. Dentith. If you've enjoyed the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, why not contribute to our Patreon or Podbean patron page? And you can contact us on podcastconspiracy@gmail.com. That's podcastconspiracy@gmail.com.
Took a chance with my music, man, it gave me insight. Cutting 4-track demos from the rhymes that I wrote. Although my lyrics were whack, man, your beats were dope. We could talk about life, music, and film, and then we would laugh till it hurt and start laughing again. And